Oh, happy Friday, everybody, sliding into the weekend with another great edition of Cocktails with Cav. Oh, as always, please follow us, share the stream so more people can get to know these incredible indie creators. You're definitely going to want to stick around. We're focusing on independent journalism tonight, and tonight's guest is just a fantastic podcaster and reporter that really demonstrates what the internet can be to make news local again, as their slogan goes. Well, tonight's show, please check out our sponsor, Run Amok Books. Their website will be in the description. We've had the privilege to interview authors all over the world, and as a mighty independent press, these guys, they really care about their creators. They're looking for independent voices, experimental forms. They're not afraid to take chances. And as I said, they really care about their indie authors and let them maintain creative control as they assist you in all the work that's entailed in getting your book out to market. So give them a check out at the website in the description, Run Amok Books. Well, let's get to it. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome to the stage podcaster and reporter from Michigan, James David Dickson. Oh, James, I'm so glad you could join us, buddy. We had some technical difficulties getting you on the show. I'm so happy we could finally get it together, bud.
Absolutely. It's so good to see you, George. I want to thank you for having me on.
Oh, no, it's my pleasure, man. I tell you, when I came across your work on X, it was just, fascinated me as one of those, even though the work's regional, up in the north there in Michigan, it's really an inspiration for what other people can do regionally with the new mediums that we're all working with here, especially with the internet.
We try to be that because, the way I look at it is everyone lives somewhere, right? And everyone's an expert on something, especially the way they live their life. And so what I try to be is the way I look at it is I try to explain Michigan to the rest of the world, right? Because it's a very specific place. I'm sure Louisiana, very specific place. And it's not, Michigan is a place where there's no driving through Michigan. Like so many, like almost every other state, you can drive through there on the way to someplace else. You have to choose to come to Michigan. You have to choose to stay in Michigan. And so it's kind of a unique place for that way where you don't just wind up here.
And that's, one of the interesting aspects of Michigan, especially I think, and you more than most would be able to fill the rest of the country in. But, around the country, we all hear some of the turmoil Michigan goes through, obviously, economically, and things of that nature, and cheering on its comeback from what I understand, Detroit making a comeback, stuff like that, So I think it's really important that, your work is highlighting the place for everybody to know what's going on, because it is a microcosm of everything around the country.
And so that's the thing. If you have a Michigan guy and you have a Louisiana guy and you have a Florida guy and you connect enough of these dots, you can see kind of what's happening elsewhere. Ever since, the presidential election really got kicked off in earnest and we learned who all four of the candidates would be. I've been really connecting with some journalists in Minnesota, a Dustin Grage or a Liz Collin. And I've been shocked to learn kind of how similar the things are that are happening in Michigan to what's happening in Minnesota, where the media is more of a fan club for politicians. They explain them rather than question them. It seems that everyone the whole thing is basically, it seems to be run on a common Democrat agenda between the two. I mean, I was kind of shocked last year when a lawmaker started talking about we needed to change our state flag. Then it turns out, I looked at Minnesota, they had just done it. So the more people you know, and the more of these kind of truth seekers you have in your back pocket, the more you can say, wait a minute, there's a group of people in this country who are reading from a common playbook, and they're just implementing 50 different versions of the same thing. So when we touch and agree, even digitally, we become more powerful.
That's it. And like I said, ladies and gentlemen, if you haven't gotten to know James, he's a wonderful guy to interact with, and very knowledgeable, especially in relation to his work. And like I said, I think when I came across the work, it struck me as how wonderful of an opportunity it might be for other creators around the country to focus in on their region and taking care of the news. And if you're not familiar with his work, you know, the Michigan Enjoyer, a media site with just a plethora of culture and art and news, and why don't you, we love to get the audience to know the creators too. Why don't you kind of give us a little background of the Michigan Enjoyer and what it's all about, so they can get an idea of what's possible in our digital age now.
Absolutely. So George, the way I look at, newspapers in their heyday, I view them as a variety show in print, where, someone who wanted that front page news, you could get that. But you could also give the rest of the newspaper to someone else, and someone would take the cartoon section, and someone would take the sports section, and someone would take the feature section, which used to be called the women's section. Someone would take the business section. But all together, that's your daily newspaper, right? It takes many different voices and types of interests to make an interesting thing that's broadly interesting, right? You're trying to, these daily newspapers, they were the papers of record for their community.
Right.
So to be that ambitious, they had to have massive staff, which took a lot of people. Took a lot of people to distribute the paper. And so you need massive readership, which means you need to be able to touch all kinds of people. It's not just like a business journal where, hey, if 300 CEOs in town read it, you're good. You need the people power of the community. And so unfortunately, as newspapers have struggled, especially the Detroit newspapers, we're blessed. We have two. We have the Detroit News, which I worked for 10 years, and the Free Press. And so most cities just have one or none. But the thing is, within those two papers, we've essentially lost the equivalent of one entire paper over the years through the shrinkage. So we basically have one real paper, you know what I mean? The equivalent of one paper left, which left the market wide open because they've gotten so far away from true stories and relevant stories. And they have this whole big list of things they don't cover, and they can't say that truth became a blue ocean. The truth was wide open, and so that's where we decided to reside.
Well, that's extremely interesting, because I know, here in the New Orleans metro area, we have our single paper, and of course you see it across the country. Obviously, legacy media struggling,
right?
Because like you said, the readership base shrinks. Most people are online now anyway, and at least in our case, yes, it's trying to cover the region and local news, but you see the bigger legacy media turning into clickbait, obviously, to get those views, the way the digital world works. And
absolutely. And with clickbait, the danger of clickbait is that at a certain point, you can think that it's your headline or your ideas or your spin sitting there in some desk that people are there for, when they want the news, they want the good stuff. And so probably about a decade ago, the Free Press in Detroit ran into this, where they had all these, it would say, this Michigan city, blah, blah, blah. And, and everything was bait. And they developed a reputation locally for kind of over promising and under delivering. And so that inspired this kind of anti-clickbait mentality in Detroit. And so you can use bait, you can use the techniques of drawing people in, but man, have the goods for them when they get there.
I think that's the point most missed, right? I mean, it's
Right.
one thing to, every market, whether it be literature. I mean, obviously, we interview a lot of authors here on Cocktails with Cav, artists, and but every market's obviously competitive. So sure, I mean, I think it's understandable to be able to compete for eyes. But you're right. I
Right.
think having that quality content once you get them to the page,
That's the thing. It's kind of like being the kind of person who I always felt that if I were to get a job interview, I'd get the job. Right? So to me, it's about getting the interview. And so like that's kind of how I view the Enjoyer. If you click on to enjoyer.com, you'll probably like it. You click onto it, click around it, click some of these stories. I mean, we have this guy, Jay-Z DeLorean. We have a guy named Jay-Z. I mean, we're in Detroit and we got a guy named Jay-Z writing for us. Like, we couldn't fail if we wanted to fail at this point. And this guy's a private eye. And he had one of the most fascinating stories where there was this, I guess, some kind of operative Republican in Western Wayne County here, very deep blue, but Republican anyway. And he's out walking with his family, comes across kind of the neighborhood bully who allegedly shoots and kills him. Our private eye does the story that no one else in Michigan did, goes to the neighborhood, looks into the guy. Turns out this guy shouldn't have even been free to do what he did. He'd had, assault cases, assault on government employees, developed another case assaulting a government employee while on trial for assaulting a government. I mean, it just terrible record, terrible guy, terrible neighbor. And there was all these people who were dying to say so.
Right.
But the media never showed up to ask them because it didn't fit any approved narrative to study that story.
Well,
so that's what we try to do, is we try to fill in those gaps.
And that's, I mean, I'm a huge fan, obviously, of that kind of journalism. Do you find your site drawing, there was a time when in newspaper history, of course, the long multi-page investigative reporters, multi-series across days, and
absolutely,
in which nowadays, obviously, legacy media just cannot uphold with that. But do you find your work on the Enjoyer is getting those views and filling that void?
Absolutely. If you're fun, if you like fun stories, if you like stories that sound like they're written by human beings, you'll like what you see at the Enjoyer. Now we do come from a conservative, center-right worldview. We're fun. So there's not gonna be a lot of stories about how, this person's anti-trans or this person's racist. We don't really play those games. So it's kind of like a nice trip back to 1999 before everyone learned to say that they were offended about everything that's ever happened.
Right.
I remember I was young once. I remember life 25 years ago. And and I liked it a little bit more back then. So it's in a sense, it's like both. It's something you haven't seen in Michigan, but it's also a throwback to a sensibility that we've lost over the years.
Oh, that's it. And so how did the Michigan Enjoyer get started? Was it, small group? And because like I said, when I first came across your work, it was something that struck me as an inspiration that, you can start internet-based, media from your desk, and one guy and drawing in people to accumulate the work. But so yeah, how did you guys get started and turn into what is now this wildly popular site up in Michigan?
So we have some, a lot of other people involved, a lot of very talented people. But so there's a friend of mine who we had some very early discussions about what a creative opportunity like this would look like. But then what really, so that conversation was going on for some time, right? For some years. And there was an excitement about what could be. And there was a consensus that what we had in Michigan just wasn't cutting it, that there was this opportunity. There was a marketplace opportunity. And then what made things pop was when I hooked up with my friend Tori Sachs. Tori is a Michigan, political operative, and she's a genius. Tori's a genius. I mean, she absolutely has a gift for getting things done. And so she knows how to ride herd on people. And when she rides herd on people, they stay rode herd on. So Tori whipped everyone into shape. And that created the opportunity for me to just do what I do best, which is write, which is podcast, which is connect and build that relationship with the audience, where they want to know that they're talking to a neighbor, not some reporting bot.
Right. And that's crucial. Yeah. And so your work on the Enjoyer now focuses obviously on your podcast, and it's definitely has its political aspects to your podcast where you talk about issues that really matter for Michigan. And I think, that's part of the issues that, a lot of people you hear the talk nowadays, especially on X even, just that there's, a leaning of bias, that it's a narrative push versus journalism.
Yes, and that's a criticism I make often, which is that news, the reason it's powerful is that you and I, when we think of news in our mind's eye, we picture a search for truth. We picture someone starting off with questions that they're trying to answer, and then going about and saying, well, who would have the answers? Who would have a different perspective on it? Who has the wisdom to see, 3 steps ahead, what might happen if this were to happen, right? That's a search for truth. Too often, though, what happens is what happened to me. Oftentimes at the Detroit News, so you have, your daily news stories, right? This person died that day, you do a story about it that day. This company, events of the day. But then you have enterprise news, where you're basically trying to get ahead and find a trend or something that hasn't been published. And so you're essentially trying to break a news in like 1,000-word piece, like give people either something they don't know at all or a different perspective on something they may have read about before. And sometimes you'd be assigned these enterprise stories, and so in news we have a budget line that you're given that, like, okay, this person's going to cover the J.D. Vance speech today, right? Like a 2-3 line. This is what's going to be about. Sometimes the budget line for the story you'd be assigned would be doggone near as long as the story itself. How could that represent? How could certainty be the start point for a search for truth?
Well, that is definitely.
You can't possibly know all these things that you're laying out, and you can't possibly know that what you know now are the angles to take, because you haven't. The search for truth hasn't been joined yet. So how do you know all that? And when you extrapolate that, you realize a lot of the news we read is from that broken process of here's what we want, here's who to talk to, and here's what perspectives this and that person might offer. That's not news.
Well, I don't think I've had an assessment put more eloquently, that's for sure. I'll tell you what, well, look, I got to refill my cocktail. Now you got me interested in the whole operation over there, James. But I tell you what, when we get back from the mid-roll break, man, let's talk about your podcast and get into some of the meat of your work you're doing with the Michigan Enjoyer. Okay, everybody, got to pay those bills. Quick mid-roll break real fast. Look, as an Amazon affiliate, I only advertise products I truly believe in, and I wanted to give everyone a heads up on this incredible product that I use myself. especially when traveling. You cannot go wrong with the Camrui Mini Desktop PC. With 16 gigs DDR4 RAM as well as a 512 gig hard drive, it's as powerful as the big, huge desktop I have at home in my office. And when I'm traveling, look, you can see it fits in the palm of your hand. It's so easy to travel with. With its multiple HDMI ports, I just simply plug it into the TV in my RV or hotel room, and I have as much computing power as I need to even produce my Cocktails with Cav show on the road. So if you're in the market for a PC, please check out our affiliate link in the description. It is so incredibly inexpensive, you're not going to believe it. So do yourself a favor, go click that affiliate link and check it out. You'll be glad you did. Oh, James, thanks so much, bud, for hanging in with me while I had to refill this thing. I tell you, you've got me extremely interested. And like I said, I was really, when I came across your work, especially your podcast, you have a lot of incredible work going on, a great team going on over there. And, do you focus, obviously Michigan is important to you and important to the enjoyer, but, obviously national things going on,
Right.
are going to tend to affect Michigan like everything else. And I noticed, that this latest episode of Tale of Three Cities, it fascinated me a lot because it had a national perspective and all tied it into you guys. So please, man, tell us about this episode and kind of give viewers an idea of the work you have going on with your podcast.
Absolutely. So Tale of Three Cities, the latest episode, it's actually number 29, our 29th podcast. I saw a statistic about something like 99% of podcasts fail before like the 21st episode. So congrats, George. We are in the 1%, my man.
I feel good. I feel good about it.
Not easy to do. Telling you, give people my Twitter handle if they need advice on how to, to reach this longevity. But A Tale of Three Cities is about Asheville, North Carolina, Maui, Hawaii, and Springfield, Ohio. And so whether you look at a fire that's set for with unknown origins, whether you look at a human crisis in Springfield, where you have literally the third world Haitians brought to your doorstep of your community, 20,000 strong, whether it is Asheville, North Carolina, where in a deep blue area in a blue state, you have people who can't get help because, quite frankly, the regime doesn't need them anymore. What are they going to do? Vote for Donald Trump? Orange man bad? No, no, you're stuck. And so in North Carolina, while people need help, I find this Zoom call where you had FEMA talking about disaster equity and the need to reach the LGBT people who've been affected. So they're not saying who needs help. If you're not on some kind of list as a gay person, if you did not partake in the gay census, the helicopter might just pass your house by.
Right.
So basically what I see in all three cities, very different places from each other. They're not all run by Democrats. They're not all run by Republicans. But the difference actually shows the commonality, which is all three are the fruits of Build Back Better. That's the governing philosophy of Kamala Harris, Tim Walz, Joe Biden. And basically the idea is your community needs to be broken before it can be rebuilt. It needs to be built back better. Now, think about the early 2000s when things were rolling. Oakland County, Michigan, where I live, was one of the richest county. It was like a top 5 rich county in America. Do you think anyone in that setting is trying to build back better? People are getting annual bonuses, the size of annual salaries.
Right.
It's a philosophy of losing that's designed for losers. And it's no coincidence that it comes at a time when people are struggling. And so I think that in Michigan, Henry Ford, I was just in Dearborn. This is the birthplace of Henry Ford. Henry Ford, the man who put the world on wheels. Henry Ford is why my grandfather moved from where you are in Louisiana to where I am now in Metro Detroit to work for Henry Ford to build those cars. And so, so like I take it deeply. I take it deeply that I'm able to be here and able to tell these stories, because it's like, it's damn near an historical anomaly that someone like myself could exist.
And I think it's almost an anomaly that, the internet has enabled voices
Yes.
to
Yes.
be able to be heard that otherwise, I mean, we talk about it a lot in a lot of the creative arts industries, even is just those gatekeepers,
And that's another one of the podcasts I did. It was talking about the 2024 election. And I think about the 2020 election, right? Democrats said we didn't steal it, we just fortified it. Okay, well, what does that mean? It means every institution pulled every lever it could to manufacture the impression that America needed regime change from Donald Trump, that the only way you'd know peace again in your life is if someone different were in the White House. America was made to think this. So I believe you could drive 81 million people into thinking that. The problem is, like Abe Lincoln said, you can't fool all the people all of the time. And so those same institutions, just 4 years later, they go to grab on those levers and they're worn down little nubs. They try to jam it and grab it, but it won't go. It doesn't give the same effect that it did 4 years ago. Nothing's working. I mean, you had a 3-on-1 debate against Donald Trump, which the next day pretty much everyone realized was fake.
Right.
So even when the media is willing to compromise its credibility just to make Donald Trump look bad, just to try to corner a guy with all of America watching, even that stuff doesn't work. So even their fake news techniques don't work anymore. So the gatekeepers are failing. It's the same thing I say. You should generally not. I mean, think about all the journalists in your town. Is there anyone you would fear writing a hit piece about you?
Right. Well, I have so many skeletons in my closet. They vote
Exactly.
too. No,
You'd have to pick one. You'd have to pick one, and you better pick a good one, because then at that point we're just going to say this is another example of fake news. Imagine stepping over all the obvious corruption in our communities to talk about some podcasting dude you don't like. Who would do that? And so it's their choices. It's their interpretations. It's the way they slant stories, and just being able to give people the tools to say, okay, I had a feeling that the news was not quite right, but now I can put it into words too. Invaluable.
Yeah. And that's one of the fascinating things I definitely wanted to ask you about is since your work with the Enjoyer, like I said, great site. Do you find it having an impact on the legacy media in your area, like, the major newspaper in your city? Do you find it affecting their reporting somewhat once you get to a place where they realize people are listening?
I find it affecting their audience. I mean, it is amazing to see. Sometimes I won't even have seen the story myself, but you'll hop on a tweet of the news or the Free Press, and by the time I'd think to give my media criticism and pull out my protractor and show you exactly the slant of that story they've printed, my people have already done it. They have the words. They have the vision to perceive what's wrong, and they now have the words to say it and spread the message to others. And so essentially the Michigan media has two choices: adapt or die. I would rather them adapt, because I read the Detroit News too. I try to not read the Free Press. It's actually terrible. But I read the Detroit News too, and I need there to be high quality news in my state that holds politicians and the powerful to account. And that used to be the Detroit News. And when I was there was almost an impossibly high standard, a standard that you would struggle to meet. And it was not an easy job. But I see some of the stuff they get away with now, and I'm just like, where has all the journalism gone? We should bring it back. And that's what we try to do with the Enjoyer.
Well, and I tell you, and I think, like I said in the beginning of the show, James, I mean, just, even though the Enjoyer's regional to Michigan, and, like I said, when I came across it, it just struck me as an inspiration to what's possible, given our digital assets that anybody can access now.
Right.
And some of the things we talked about and how it affects even legacy media. I just think it's critical. And so, ladies and gentlemen, if you haven't had a chance to get to know James, like I said, give him a follow. Of course, his screen name will be there in the description of the show for you. But go check out the Michigan Enjoyer, and that's enjoyer.com. That link will be in the description of the show as well. But go check it out. Definitely go check out James' podcasts. Fantastic, man. Fantastic, my friend. And look, you guys and gals out there all across the country, look, get some inspiration because it is possible with what's available to us nowadays to actually get the truth back out there. So
yes.
But James, my friend, I so appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule, man, because I know you're working hard up there in Michigan. But thanks for taking the time and coming on Cocktails with Cav and sharing your story and getting the word out, man.
George, I really appreciate the opportunity. It's a blessing to have this conversation with you. Cheers.
And cheers to you, my friend.